The good news is that the jobs report, which is what I want to talk about, record-setting jobs report, our great government added 74,000 employees, right? Over the last month, 1 month, January, they added 74,000 employees. So that's really exciting. I mean, maybe they're gearing up to actually solve some problems. They need some help, or they're just continuing to bloat. And finally, Ebola Biden's IRS agents are getting hired. So now we're all going to have to get hounded by the IRS, which can't even seem to do the simplest of things like open their mail.
Right.
So that's good news, I guess.
Hold on. Everybody's
front.
announcing layoffs, and the government hired almost 75,000 people in the last month. Right?
Yeah,
Is that correct?
75,000 people. Yeah, in January.
Goodness gracious! And what was the trucking industry like? What did the trucking add jobs?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like the big sources of employment, and this again was like off the charts job report, right? Like nobody expected what came out in the jobs report. Like we all hear about layoffs, but that's really not showing up in the data. And so the big adders of employment, right? The big gainers: leisure and hospitality, private education and health, professional and business services, and then followed by government. And transportation and warehousing, specifically trucking, gained very moderately, right? 4,100 employees. And what I think is interesting about that story is if you look at the last 3 months, so the fourth quarter of 22, trucking actually shrank in employment and got hit relatively hard. Transportation as a whole shrank in employment. And now in January, right, like everything is turned around.
Right.
We're starting to see growth again, which is, I guess, good and bad, right? I mean, I think what it highlights is that consumer demand is still pretty strong given inflation, which is good for the trucking industry. I mean, we continue to see news about FedEx and UPS and all these guys furloughing people, but somebody's hiring.
Right.
And this, again, keep in mind the jobs report is like it accounts for firings and hirings, so it's a net gain in employment, right?
Right. And that's the issue is like, because I've seen numerous articles now about how the rates are still cheap. It's still brutal trying to book loads. And it's like, well, how are we still adding jobs when the rates are still really bad as a whole? And so it's like, like we mentioned last week on the pod, by raising the minimum insurance, that would get some carriers out of the business, essentially, or out of the industry, so to speak. And like that would be the only way to essentially raise the rates. And it's like, but it seems like there's no break. Like they're guys that are working hard, trying to make it through. They're not getting a break because everyone's still hiring or something, or consumers are still spending money, I guess.
Yeah. In construction and manufacturing, both added a ton of jobs. It really doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? Given the economic cycle and where the Fed is and all the, like you would expect, rate increases that happened last year would begin to damper the economy, but it doesn't seem to be the case. And I don't know. I mean, there are some people out there saying, well, the jobs report is crazy because everybody's taking a second job, like labor participation continues to climb. People who haven't participated in the labor market since COVID, inflation's really taking its toll, and they're coming back and saying, oh, now I actually need an income. And maybe that makes sense, right? Because leisure and hospitality is a huge gainer. So, that would be like an hourly type role that you could do at night or on the weekend. Maybe that makes sense. Look, the other thing I thought that was really interesting about this report is the wage data. So if you look at transportation and warehousing, the average employee is bringing home $36 an hour, which is up quite substantially from where it was this time last year. So we're not only seeing wage growth, but we're also seeing employment growth, which I think is an interesting story.
Wow. So, I mean, yeah, Matt, go ahead.
I was just thinking about these people. Who are these people that spent 3 years watching The Price is Right on their couch and just like,
Yeah.
I think, you know what? Maybe I'll work again. I'm like, who are? After like
Yeah.
a month, I'd be clawing at the walls. I don't know.
Right.
Well, I
Yeah,
think
and-
part of
these
it
people.
though, I think part of it though is the gig economy, right? I think a lot of people went into the gig economy. They're like, I can drive an Uber, I can do DoorDash, I can do whatever, and make kind of roughly the same amount of money that I was making working and not have to deal with going to the office every day or whatever. And maybe that's changing. Maybe these people are picking up second jobs in hotels. That's kind of what this looks like. I don't know.
Right. Or, I mean, leisure, that'd be like you're working at a bar or a restaurant too, right? Wouldn't leisure kind of fall into there? So it's like you drive Uber during the week, you pick up a couple of bar shifts, you know, you hang out with your college buddies or whatever the case may be, and you do the bar shift, and there you go. You're making at least, you know, $1,000 or $1,200 a week between those two things.
Yeah.
And you don't have to
So
ever, you know, it's interesting.
yeah, I mean, look, and I think that the good news here is for the drivers.
Mhm.
Like, I think that this is good news for truck drivers, right? Like the driver market is still strong. Pay seems to be increasing, even though rates are kind of crappy right now. Like, I think that that's the underlying story. Now we'll see how this plays out. Like, obviously, this report may be a bit of an anomaly, and it may actually go the other way
Right.
this month
But-
when February comes out, but we'll see.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I was looking at like the volumes, like how much volume of freight is being moved right now. Even though the rates are, you know, like from what I've seen, not good. From what everyone's saying, they're just not good. The rates are kind of cheap. And again, maybe they are saying it's cheap because of the year that we just, you know, whatever
Right,
had,
relative.
the record year that we've had over the last year and a half or so. But it's interesting because the volumes, the amount of freight being moved is still higher than 2019. So even though we have this, we feel like we're in a massive slump, right? Like, you know, obviously we talk to trucking companies every day. We talk to carriers all the time. And even though sometimes we hear like, yeah, it's really slow right now. It's a rough season. It's whatever the case may be. And, the articles and whatnot show it. It's like the volumes are still higher, noticeably higher than 2019. So before essentially all the craziness. So if you're out there, you know, not having a good week or a good weekend or, you know, or not a good trip, just keep in mind that volumes, that they're still good. Consumers are still spending. But based on the jobs reports that we had, like everything seems to be doing all right. Any final thoughts, Matt?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to stay optimistic, so that's good to hear. It's good to hear your refreshing Gen Z take. Everything's hunky dory, nothing to worry about.
That's fun.
I mean, the way I see it is like we're still kind of emerging from the 2+ almost 3 year nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much of this is true, like gains versus just kind of recovering from the nightmare. I'll just call it that.
Right.
I don't want to get any more political than that, but
I don't know.
You know, so
Right.
it's like, are we just finally, hopefully, returning to sanity?
To normal.
Anyway, we'll go with your take.